Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first December, or last November, actually, Budget and Facilities meeting, or Board of Education work session, actually, focused on budget and facilities. We were hoping to have a presentation about another potential, I guess, building use, field use, property use, but it looks like our guests are not going to be able to make it for that, so we are going to move forward with a couple of things, but I guess let's, if we're going to call this a work session, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everybody could rise for the pledge. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Mary, I guess go ahead and call the roll.
I wasn't really prepared for that. Okay. Mrs. Weisberg.
I'm here.
Ms. Gilliar.
Here.
Ms. Johnson.
Here.
Ms. Brooks.
Here.
Ms. Hayes.
Here.
Mr. Greenstein.
Here.
And Ms. Epstein.
Here.
Thank you.
I thank you, Mary. I'm just going to say if anybody, if we lose anybody for power reasons, given the insane weather, or Wi-Fi reasons, given the insane weather, any board members, just shoot me a text. Any of the staff that can't rejoin for whatever reason, let Mary know, just so we know where everybody is. And we will move over to Dr. Hines, who's going to go over the plan that we have should the district, or when the district, because I think it's probably when the district needs to begin testing, because I believe yellow zone or not, I have a feeling that's coming down the pike. So,
sure. And part of the reason why we're discussing this, I think many of us know that Great Neck was designated as a yellow zone area last week. And, you know, as far as our numbers and where they're going, and we've been discussing, you know, post Thanksgiving, we always want to make sure we are as prepared as possible. So what happens, and to really reduce it down to its simplest form, is that if our school district or an area within our school district is designated as a yellow zone, if we have one, if we have 3 schools within that area, we have to test 20% of the building population over X amount of days. So what happens is we would have to test both students and staff, and it doesn't have to be 20%. You know, it doesn't have to be half students, half staff. It could be any type of mixture of that. And that was made very clear to us last week when the Nassau County superintendents met with the Department of Health. But the difficulty is that for most school districts, I will say specifically in Nassau County, is that we have to set something up like an LSL, which is a limited service laboratory. Now, our counterparts in Suffolk, or if you look at Westchester, if one of their areas within that county becomes a yellow zone, they contact the Department of Health. The tests are shipped to this into the area, and as well as the personnel to help administer those tests. For some reason, Nassau County, that's not happening where we are. So what we have to do, not just us here in Port Washington, but other school districts have to really try to subcontract out and go out and look at agencies to assist us. And so we are looking, and we will be working with St. Francis Hospital, and they will assist us in doing so as far as testing, the data collecting, you know, all the nuts and bolts stuff to make that happen. And I believe St. Francis right now is working with a few school districts we're contracted to in Nassau County, and a few, actually, I believe 1 or 2 in Suffolk County. Be that as it may, then there's the consideration for consent forms. If we have our students, not if, we would need our students, we would need parental consent in order for those tests to take place within the school buildings. And so we have a Google Sheet, we have consent forms ready to go. They were worked on with our attorneys, so we know the language is in a good place. And so we will have a mechanism in place to share it with that school community if and when we needed to do that. And the question becomes, what if staff and or students don't want to? If they say, we don't want to get tested, if the parents aren't really keen on having that take place, or the staff chooses not to. And so there are some considerations that we would have to take place. One of them would be we would have to then most likely then work remotely. The students would have to learn remotely. And so there's a whole host of things that go into making sure all of our ducks are in a row. But the hardest one, the most difficult one, and I want to thank not only Ms. Callahan, but certainly Dr. Allen and Dawn Bollerman for working with St. Francis to get this information for us to move forward. And we have that language. We have something in place right now where our attorneys are reviewing what that language is. And from there, we would move forward. So I'm happy to say we have a plan in place. We are hoping, though, we do not become a yellow zone. And let me tell you, if it becomes an orange zone, it becomes even more difficult. Because then we go up to 25% as far as the threshold, and I believe you have to, I think, close for 4 days, before you open up again, and then start that whole process. So right now we're taking it one step at a time. We were very proactive. We started this journey, I want to say, a few weeks ago, and we're in a good place right now. And we'll be ready to go if and when we need to do so. So that's where we are right now. And I think I was talking offline with some of my colleagues here. It's as far as the thresholds, like what you hear, 2.5%, 3%, 3.5%, and again, I have 4, 5, 6 different memos from the Department of Health. But you do wonder why some areas move to a yellow zone and some don't. I would have thought, based on some of our numbers from last week, that we would be on the cusp. But from what I understand, that's not necessarily so. But that can always change within a few days for sure. So that's what I have for you at the moment right now. And I just want to let the board know that we have a lot of our administrators on top of this, and we'll be ready to go.
So, Mike, my understanding for the yellow zone testing is 20% of the students that are in person need to be tested over the course of 2 weeks, but that's a one-time thing. So
That's
we
correct.
have to test those 20%, and if we are below,
That's correct.
right, the area's numbers, then we
Yep.
stay. And then my other understanding is that the red zone, that's totally different, because that's 20%, 25% every week. And
Every
that
week.
continues until we're not in orange zone anymore.
So, and the other thing too, and the reason why we're talking about it here is because there's a price point attached to this. So this does come at an expense. So when we move forward with St. Francis, it'll cost us roughly $40,000 in order, yes, $40,000 in order for us to do so. So, and again, this we will be, rumor has it, reimbursed through FEMA. But as I've shared with my colleagues here, I wouldn't hold our breath too long as far as when we would see that money. But the reality is, this is another expense that the district, and all districts actually, Nassau County would have to be a part of.
Mike, I don't know if you or Mary could expand on the 40,000. Is that just for that first 20% testing, or is it 40,000 continuing?
I would have to pull that language out and see. So when we talk about something else, I can review that and then answer that question.
Okay. Deb had some questions too. Go ahead, Deb.
I do, thanks. So I was going to ask, in Suffolk County, where the Department of Health is actually involved, do the schools have to foot the bill for that, or is that covered by the Suffolk County Department of Health?
My understanding, the way I heard it, was that it was covered. So, and I think that's why some of my colleagues here in Nassau are up in arms right now. Yeah. It's another expense, and it's the way it happens. So not only do school districts have to go out and, tongue in cheek here, shop around to find different agencies to assist us, then there's the shipping of the tests, the coordination of all that. Again, it's the data collecting. If and when someone is positive, what happens from there? At least, and again, with this agency, it's all inclusive. So with St. Francis, all of that is covered for us, which is the good news. The bad news is it's $40,000. But to answer your question, yes.
So I know we're not there yet. Beth seemed to indicate that she thought this was more imminent than not. Can you explain a little? I guess I don't know if I want to can we get into the logistics, or should we just stick with the money issue? Let me just stick with the money issue. Could students go to their own providers? Would that help, especially if they're covered by insurance? I believe the rapid is not covered by insurance, but I think the more reliable test is.
Yeah, so and I'm glad you brought that up. So when I met with my Nassau County colleagues, both in our quadrant and in our countywide session, there were many more questions and answers as far as what that entails. And so that was one of the questions that came up was, if a parent chooses to get their own test, with their child, can the district use that information? And the answer is yes.
Deborah, I would say it's not that I think that this yellow zone, orange zone is more imminent. Cuomo keeps talking about his new winter plan to keep schools open. And I have a feeling that his new winter plan to keep schools open is going to involve testing. That's just, right now we're going on my conjecture. I didn't watch the news conference today. I don't know if he mentioned anything. But as he talks about his new winter plan and also talks about how testing is the best way to keep control of the virus and that schools staying open is a priority, you combine those three, and my gut is telling me that we are going to end up on the testing road at some point soon, whether we are a yellow zone or whether everybody starts testing. I think one way or another.
So another unfunded mandate. So another unfunded mandate.
It is, and Deb, just to take it a little bit further, the superintendents in Nassau County are totally behind County Executive Curran to keep our schools open, but we need help from the county in order to do so. And so that is the messaging that's going toward her office. And hopefully, listen, we may plan to use St. Francis, but maybe the county will do something in the meantime before, if and when we become a yellow zone.
So Beth, if I could just jump in, because those, I think Deb's done, and that was actually in line with my questions. So just kind of, if we are asking, I guess the Nassau Soups are all getting together and writing something or speaking to the county executive, and just maybe to also verify whether or not Suffolk is actually paying for everything, and if in fact we are being asked to pay for it on our own in Nassau. But what I wanted to bring up is that, I think we can help in perhaps just putting together a letter as a board to our county executive, and maybe if we can somehow speak to some of our counterparts, or ask when you speak to the other Nassau Soups, ask that their boards write letters, and that we can get those letters to our state legislators as well. To the governor, I don't know if he'll listen, but I think the more that we talk about how, I think we need to start speaking out a little bit more and asking for help in the testing expenses, if in fact, as Beth kind of thinks, and I agree with her, I think that in order for us to keep our schools open, we are going to wind up having to be somehow testing. So I think I'm suggesting to the board, it's not necessarily a question, but I think if we could get together, and I'll volunteer as part of the legislative task force to put something together that we can then maybe share with our with the rest of the Nassau superintendents, that they could then share with their boards, or maybe somebody's already done that. And anyway, I think we need to just get on this legislatively, and hopefully it'll turn something around.
Yeah. Beth, if I can just add, to go back, I think, to the question you may have asked. So when we're contracting with St. Francis, it's for 24 sessions, 4 hours each, and that would total around $40,800. The other thing too, when we were speaking as superintendents, some of the scenarios that popped up was to have turnkey training for our nurses to administer the tests. and or the administrators. And I'm just sharing with you, we would never do that. We wouldn't want to put anybody in that position whatsoever. It's not like we're turnkey training for curriculum and instruction. This is something a little more different. So I just want to let you know that there is that scenario out there, which I don't think any of us subscribe to. So, but as far as the number of sessions, what that entails, Dr. Shields, I forgot how many tests they assumed they would administer within a day, within the 4 hours. Did they give an estimation?
Yeah, they estimated about 200 tests in a 4-hour period of time.
And also, as it was explained, I think this morning at Cabinet, Dr. Hines, it's not the entire district, it's a particular building.
That's correct.
So for example, at Manor Haven, you might have a total with staff of 400. So you're going to have to test 80, and that would be less than the 4-hour period. So I'm hoping that the 4-hour period is also prorated, since I wasn't around for earlier discussions of that. But so we may not spend the $40,000 at all. Depends on where these areas pop up.
How much of the district ends up, and right. I
That's
mean, like
correct.
I said, I am, my gut's telling me that this is going to be more longer term and different than we thought it was 2 weeks ago, because I think that I think if you look at the numbers across the state, the idea of a yellow zone, an orange zone, and a red zone almost goes away, because I think most of the state is approaching hitting those percents, as you said, Dr. Hines. As the numbers that we were told, I feel like we all should be in that zone now, and I think it's not happening because it would be the entire state at this point, and they're not looking to do that. So I think they're moving forward with a different plan. That just the way Cuomo keeps talking about his winter plan, I think he's moving forward with a different plan, and I think that this testing is going to be more widespread. So it's going to be difficult for us. For sure, unless the state's going to supply some support. And I think, to that point, and training perhaps for the nurses, because I do think they could administer the tests. Medical assistants are administering them in doctors' offices. So certainly our nurses would be able to be trained. But I know from my other volunteer work that you can only do testing if you have a limited lab license, which we probably do not have as a school district, so it would have to be under the guise of somebody else. But the Department of Health could probably provide that.
They could.
So,
They could, and that was, again, some of the things that were discussed last week. I think for the most frustrating part, and I know we're here to talk about budget, I mean, clearly, is the amount of time and effort this will cost, which comes at a price point as well. So the time and energy that our staff have to either, enter data or just work with parents, or just even, gathering this. The fact there's no universal consent form is ludicrous. That each district has to come up with their own in order to make this happen. But anyway, I'm not trying to. It's not a question. These are just the realities that we're dealing with in real time, and to the best of our ability. And so when I look to Great Neck and others that are in the yellow zone, when the superintendents share those experiences, we will learn from them. We'll learn what to do, what not to do, and I think we'll be all the better for it.
Emily, I just have a quick suggestion. If you're going to start working on something with legislative task force, is that we find out what's really happening in Rockland and in Suffolk County and other places, because it would be much easier to lobby for something that we know exactly what we're sort of asking for versus just an unknown question. So before, that would just be my suggestion, to try and figure out what's going on exactly.
I know
Thank
Hampton
you.
Bays and Riverhead, there's no expense. There's been no expense for them so far.
They set up those testing sites in Hampton Bays and Riverhead before they were designated as
Yep.
yellow. I know I saw
Yep.
that. I believe the same thing happened in Rockland. So I think that just to know exactly what happened and how they worked with the school districts to make sure that the students got tested would be, would certainly be something to find out. Debbie, you had more questions?
Yes, Beth, that would be the plan.
Okay.
I do, thank you. So I guess this goes to budget because it involves the number of students. You know, on the county website, they have us broken down into, I think, the villages. So the village of Sands Point, the village of Flower Hill, the unincorporated areas, village of Manor Haven. Do we know how these, if any, how we're being designated? How are the yellow zones being designated? Are they being designated according to those geographic designations or those political designations? Because so it's not as a zip code, and it's not as a whole school district. So let's say the village of Sands Point is designated. We now have several schools involved. We would have Manor Haven, we would have Daly, we would have Weber, we would have Schreiber. So how does that work? Is it only for the residents of those villages? How is that determined? Because that will affect eventually the money that gets spent. Does anybody know? Question.
Great
Deb, I think
question.
that's the question, Deb. I don't think that's a question that anybody here can answer. I think that's a question that we can put out to our, legislators and ask how they're doing it. I don't think there's a rhyme or reason. The way that the counties had broken up the numbers and the reporting is based on the incorporated villages, like you said, right? But there's no way. So if that's the case, then you're not going to just put Port Washington proper and not. So I think that we're going to have to ask them how they do. That could very well be why we haven't been designated a yellow zone yet, because when you start taking all of the areas in Port, so Port Washington proper looks like it's a hot spot, but then when you look at the incorporated villages, they're not. So maybe that's bringing down our average, but that's a question I think we need to ask the county executive. I have no idea. We don't know. This isn't. It's not ours.
I mean, Great Neck, all of Great Neck was designated. And Great Neck is similar to Port Washington in that they have Kings Point and Lake Success and some other areas. So I don't.
But if you looked at Great Neck's incorporated villages, they all were on a high number. If you look at our incorporated villages, Port Washington proper, if you just look under Port Washington, that has a higher number. But when you start to look at the villages, like the incorporated areas, Manor Haven, Flower Hill, Muncie.
Manor Haven's the highest out of all of it.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think those numbers are lower.
No,
those
last
numbers
I checked, Manor Haven was very high. Manor Haven was higher than Port Washington, but not to whatever argue the point. But
again, there's also different areas with different numbers. If you go by like the Newsday tracker, that has Manor Haven low. So I guess it depends. Again, these are all questions and the confusion. And I think it's also the confusion in our community as well. And we've seen emails from parents that are asking, when are we going to be a yellow zone? How are we being determined to be a yellow zone? We don't have that answer. And I think we need to get that answer. So we'll get that answer. The way I suggest is that we ask our legislators, like, how is that good old governor figuring it out?
If anybody, I think that, I don't know if anybody's.
Isn't it just up to the whim of the governor? He decides what a yellow zone is, and he says this school is a yellow zone or this area is a yellow zone, depending upon what he feels like doing.
Yeah.
So everybody be nice to the governor. Everybody, we love you. Be nice to him.
Right then, Larry, I have to agree, because there are parts of Western New York that aren't yellow zones that are like 8%. So I think that's the problem. I think that's what Dr. Hines is sort of coming down to. Like, a bomb could be dropped at any point, and we just have absolutely no idea of when.
We just need to be ready.
It's not just the testing rate; it's also the number of cases per 100,000 residents, or also, right?
Correct.
So
there's
places,
like 4 different metrics.
Right. So those people in Western New York may have a high testing rate, but they may not have a lot of cases because nobody lives there.
Well, actually, that would make it worse, because if they had a high testing rate and less people living there, they might not be designated a yellow zone, because there's so few people that their cases per however many looks so high because of the lower density. Which is the problem. I think that there's discretion in this. There's clearly discretion in this. And so I don't think we have I just don't think, as you said, Dr. Hines, we just have to be ready for whatever it is they decide to say.
Well, I mean, as I shared with my colleagues this morning, when we look at just the school districts, so since we're talking about Great Neck, I believe right now has 38 students who have tested positive. We're at 40 right now, so it's very similar. Yet, so it's not just about the number of kids. Now on a dashboard, you'll see ours says 30, but we had to wait until after Thanksgiving break to update the dashboard. But the point I'm trying to make is, you have a school district who's large, like Great Neck, and they're in a yellow zone. We aren't, and we have, I think, 2 more kids who have tested positive and counting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just looking at the latest update from today's press conference, and he is saying that he's got 5 new steps to helping keep schools open and keep everything open. So I don't know. I don't even know how much this yellow, red, and orange zone thing is even going to be the case by the time we talk next week, or whether there's that's just sort of my gut. So we shall see. But I appreciate that. Mary, I guess we'll kick it back to you and see where we're at budget-wise.
Well, relative to COVID expenses, that number has not changed since our last meeting. This recommendation for testing services hopefully will be on the agenda for next week, which would then add an additional $40,000 in anticipated expenses. Relative to budget for this year, we are looking now at our revenues, not even talking about state aid, because we might not know the answer to our current year's state aid until April. But relative to our own internal expectations for things like adult ed, driver's ed, rental of facilities, right now we're expecting those numbers to be down by about $300,000 on the revenue side of the budget. So that just adds to our issue of how much will we need to increase our budget by when we finally do determine that we have all of our COVID expenses in and our revenues taken into consideration. And relative again to next week's budget, I don't know if Dr. Hines wants to speak about this, but we do have a letter of intent, an item for BOE services that Dr. Hines is hoping the board will consider relative to mission, vision, and so on, that he has had preliminary discussions with the board about, I believe. Dr. Hines, would you like to talk about that item, which is $15,000?
Yes, and we'll have some conversations with the board as far as I know. Community feedback is very important. Has been a topic that I know the board has brought up many times. As the board knows, I've sent out a survey monkey to the staff and to the community related to just how the school year is going. I also shared with the board that I was looking at 2 different platforms. And so I will make the formal recommendation to the board very soon as far as one of them, and it's called Thought Exchange. Thought Exchange is utilized by many school districts, not only here on Long Island, but in New York State and nationwide. It's a wonderful mechanism to not only engage community staff in conversations, but it provides really, not to use the robust word again, but robust reports as well in real time, which is really, really important. And you can use it for when we begin our core value, vision, mission work, graduate over profile work. Also, when we look to begin our strategic plan, our 5-year plan as far as what that entails. But I think just as important, we can use it for the budget. poll and to just see how the community's feeling about certain things that we're discussing related to the budget, to have real information for the board to consider as we're moving forward. So I've spoken to representatives from Thought Exchange. I even spoke to 2 superintendents. One is the president of the New York State Superintendent Association, who utilizes it in his school district and is a firm believer in it. He says he probably uses it too much at this point, but the fact of the matter is that there's, in his words, before Thought Exchange and after Thought Exchange, and the world in his educational landscape and the community he's serving is much better because of that engagement and that feedback loop being closed, which is really important. So my recommendation to the board will be we move forward with this come January. I think the timing couldn't be any better. And we can talk about what that expense is. I also think the return on this investment will be significant.
Rachel, you had a question from before, and then we'll see if anybody has any questions about that.
Nah, it's okay. The moment has passed.
You sure?
Yeah, it's okay. We moved on. It's all right.
Okay. You can always send it in an email and see if we have any answers. Does anybody have any comments or questions about this platform that Dr. Hines is talking about?
Because we're getting it through BOCES, is it aidable?
It is.
Okay. So that brings it down, but we don't see the money till next year. Is correct?
Correct.
Correct?
Yes.
If we get it.
If we get it.
Yeah. Okay.
If the board's agreeable to it, correct.
Well, if the state actually gives us the money when they're supposed to next year.
Oh, well, that too. Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Because if they do convert everything to foundation aid, we don't get it.
Oh, gosh. Very true.
Mike, which district did you say was the one that is using it and has a before and after?
Oh, gosh. I'm gonna have to. No, it's Kevin McGowan is the superintendent. I can get that information for
I'm
you.
just curious.
And actually, I can send the board some videos that he's utilized and some of the information he shared with me. It's really, really profound. It's rare that you find a superintendent who doesn't mind engaging the community and looking at the feedback, warts and all. And he just said it's really, it's worked in so many different ways. Initially, he started it for strategic planning, but then has used it really for anything, like even when communicating with the board. So you can use it in small groups, or you can use it in super large groups like the community, or sub portions of our community and staff. But I'll send the board that information.
Would this be I have a quick question. Would this be something?
Thank you.
Everybody has researched it for you, so you've gotten quite a few answers.
Thank you. I forgot we have 4 or 5 attorneys here, so and a staff researcher. Yeah.
Would this be something?
Expert Googlers.
Right? Expert Googlers. We are good.
I barely had the sentence out and you got it.
Would the principals be able to use these? Classroom teachers? Is it something that once we have would be accessible by more people to use on even smaller scales?
Sure. If we chose to move in that direction. I know, I believe Kevin is using it just with his administrators are using it right now. I haven't heard so much that teachers utilize it, but maybe they do. I just know that it's really intuitive as far as how to use it with an inquiry. And then the reports were really the most amazing thing, how everything was really at your fingertips and you had this information in real time. So I'll give a very quick example, even though it's probably not the best example. Let's just say I inquired or threw an inquiry out there with the community, would you support a budget, I'm not saying this would happen, over 2%, right? So just to put it out there, what would happen is with that very simple inquiry, the inquiry would go out to the community, either via email or some other mechanism. They would respond to it, and what happens is community members respond to other community members' responses, and they rate them and they weigh them on a scale 1 to 5. So you can really start understanding what people are not only thinking, but thinking about other people's responses as well. It's all anonymous, so it's not like, oh, I can't believe Deb Brooks said this, and then Julie Epstein said that. That's not the way it goes. But what you find, again, in real time is what people are truly, truly thinking, not just a blanket statement, but what people, you can really deduce a lot. And I think that's the beauty of it. So it can be as complicated as you want or as simple as you want, and you can use it as often as you would like. What I didn't like about the other platform, which will remain nameless, is the fact that you had to have a team build surveys. And I think for the type of work that we're looking to do in real time is to not have people sit around and create surveys, even though surveys are useful. Not that we wouldn't want to use a survey at some point, but I think the things that we want to find out again in real time just really move me over to this direction. And by the way, the superintendent in this particular district had both at one time, but chose to stay with this particular platform.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Beth, I just want to point out that Julie sent to everybody what the governor's metrics formula was. We have it. I guess she, again, super researcher. She was researching it well. But Julie, I didn't read it. Is there a easy formula explanation? No. Okay.
Yeah, it's 5 metrics. They seem a little subjective to some degree. So, but at least it leads out the 5 metrics and how they arrived at.
Okay. So just for the record, we do have it.
It's out there. I've read it. I just don't understand it, to be quite honest. I don't know. Did you understand it any better, Julie? Because I've read it numerous times, and the only thing I understand is the testing piece, what we have to do when we get into those zones. I don't really understand how we get into the zones.
I agree. I think it reads as it's very subjectively. Like it lays out some parameters, but the subjectivity of it all is what leaves a lot of confusion, I think.
That's sort of where I was leaning to. All right. Does anybody have any more questions about the testing or about this before we move on with Mary? Mary, I have one other question for you about budget, and that is, are there any savings that we're seeing at this point from anything, any programs not running, any monies that have not been spent from from September to, let's say we're pretty much know where we're going as of January, that will be savings the district will realize, or really nothing?
I cannot say at this point there are any savings. We are running clubs. We will be doing athletics as long as there are no changes from the governor. There are only a very few number of sports that will not run. You will remember that we really did cut the budget, and I get requests all the time from various departments asking us to help fund activities for which they don't have full funding themselves. We may be seeing some savings in district supplies, but those are really not very large numbers to begin with.
And do we have any sense, I think we're all assuming, or we've all been working on the assumption that we will be able to take money from reserves to cover this. Is that something we're going to have to apply to the state to do, or do we have some sense that the state's going to recognize the emergency situation in the pandemic and allow school districts to do that? Have you heard anything from your colleagues?
That is allowable by Board of Education resolution.
Which we did, didn't we?
Written to you to do any of that because I am waiting to see the status of our state aid. Did you say something, Emily? I didn't hear that.
No,
I'm sorry.
Didn't pass a resolution yet.
Wasn't there a resolution on the board agenda?
We've moved money, but we haven't exceeded our budget yet. We haven't passed a resolution to exceed the budget.
But we've been doing it right, but the resolutions that we've been doing have been basically to be moving whatever budget money.
We are doing resolutions to move money within the budget to more appropriate codes as needed. But we anticipate that our overall budget is not sufficient to meet our needs for the year, having spent $3.7 million for COVID. We do have money in our unassigned fund balance and in our designated reserves. We are allowed to move from all but one of those reserves without the state's authorization, and I would not have been making a recommendation to move from that specific reserve in any instance.
Mary, so my question is, when do you anticipate we would start to have those conversations? I imagine, we obviously haven't overspent our budget yet because we're only in December. So that money was budgeted for the year. So we have some time. Are you waiting until we have a better sense of A, how much money it ends up being in real numbers, and B, whether we lose state aid, or those sort of the two things we're waiting on?
They are both of those items, yes, and I would say that B, the state aid, is the larger concern, because I know where we are overall in these additional expenses and can look at budget lines to see if a few $100,000 can be absorbed by any of our existing lines. But it is the shortfall of revenue that definitely has me concerned. And that's a matter of when the governor finally makes an announcement, what is going to happen, or the federal government says under the old administration / new administration, if the CARES Act money is coming or not.
Understood. So we really are not going to probably be able to have a real heavy discussion about this until January, February. Is that your anticipation?
I would say that's accurate, yes.
So is it going to hold up our 2021-2022 budget process?
I don't think it will hold up the 21-22 budget process, because initially we deal with the expenditure side to see how much of an increase the district can afford relative to the tax levy limit, and then build against our revenues to see what the gap is for the taxes. That's the second portion. And I think we will have had our discussion already about increasing the current year's budget and having a better idea of what the remaining reserves are for you to then make an informed decision about how much revenue you can use for next year.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions for Mary? You can speak. I'm going to go through everybody just to make sure. Julie, anything?
Okay, I think I have a question. So Mary, even though we're at this precarious state and uncertainty still, is it possible for us to have like a budget versus actual kind of document prepared for the board, just so we can see where we are from an actual spending to date, or at least in December for our next meeting, versus what we have budgeted to date?
Well, the board does receive on a monthly basis what's referred to as an appropriation status report,
yes,
which shows you the original budget, the expenses to date, and the amount of money remaining. Is that adequate for what you're looking for?
I think so. That report also includes that pandemic spending that we have had in there as well within those reporting, right?
Yes, it does, because that report simply shows every dollar that has been expended and how much money has been encumbered, which means dollars for purchases that have either not been received or for which we have not received bills. So any monies that have been committed by the district are indicated in that report. And it also has salary figures in there as well. Now, the only thing that will not be committed in there that you have to understand will be is in the co-curricular area, because traditionally coaches and club leaders are paid at the end of the year, and that's through a submission of a pay slip. So oftentimes that money does not show as being all spent, but you could almost count on $1 million in that area.
Perfect. All right, thank you. I'll review that again. Thank you.
Okay.
Deb, do you have anything?
No, I was just thinking about how come next year we'll have all the sinks we need, all the laptops and devices, and we won't
Well,
have to go through this again. That was my
HEPA filters. Yeah, we're good.
that was my silver lining thought. No, I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
We also are going into next year with all of these laptops and computers and devices, so that'll be another positive. I have a feeling that's going to end up being a cost actually too, but you know. Rachel? Is Rachel still here?
I'm here. Sorry, didn't hear you say my name.
That's
I'm
okay.
good. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Larry?
I'm good, thanks.
Emily?
Nope. Good.
Nora?
Great.
Okay. Well, then I think if we are all
Wait, Beth,
finished-
Mike has something. I think Mike.
I have a little bit of good news for next year's budget, not this year's. Dr. Shields, do you mind sharing with the board how many retirements we're slated to have, at least at this moment? Tomorrow's, I think, the deadline, right? But we have a number at least right now.
Yes, tomorrow is the deadline for teachers to inform us if they want to inform us early about their retiring, so they can receive an additional sick day buyout, which was part of the last contract negotiation. So far we have 5 retirements for this coming June, and by the end of tomorrow, I'll have an update for you on that total.
Thank you, Chris. That's good news. Thank you. Dr. Himes, that's good news. Is this the first of 2 opportunities for them to retire, or is this the last sort of opportunity for them to get anything extra?
No, this is the one opportunity. So they let us know nice and early, and then we can budget accordingly. And if we can save between $150,000 to $200,000, that certainly helps.
Everything helps. Everything helps. Emily or Nora, if we're all done, does somebody want to? I know we wanted to.
I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead.
So I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter.
I will second. Or Julie, you seconding? All in favor?
I think Mary has to.
I think Mary has to do.
Mary, I call that.
Or you know what? No, I think we could all raise our hand. No, right? Could we all raise our hands on those?
Well, I mean,
No,
we
Mary, you probably
started,
should do it.
yeah, let me call. Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Miss Gilliard,
Yes.
Miss Weisberg,
Yes.
Miss Bays,
Yes.
Miss Brooks,
Yes.
Miss Epstein,
Yes.
and Mr. Greenstein.
Yes.
And am I correct that we are all supposed to sign off?
We are all
Yes.
signed off, and I think we have a new link for those who are coming to this exec session.
Oh, okay, great.
So you
Are
are,
we-
Mary.
Question, are we going to wait till 2 or are we going to go straight in?
I think
No, go
Rachel,
straight in.
right,
Straight in?
Rachel,
Okay.
you had time
So-
constraints, Rachel, so
No
straight
bathroom
in
breaks?
better.
No bathroom break.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so we
Bye.
will end the public meeting.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.